Good morning, everybody. It is May 29th at 10 o'clock Pacific time, and this is Coastal Drone Live, number 22 for 2024. Today, we're going to talk about agricultural drones. So by the end of today's talk, you'll have a little bit of idea what sort of applications for agricultural drones, what are the regulatory requirements, and what sort of gear and hardware is available in the marketplace to get started in agriculture. And we've got a special guest today. Maya from Turntech in Langley is here with us today. Maya, why don't you introduce yourself and maybe just say a little bit about you?
Thanks for having me here. It's just great, and happy to talk about drones and particularly agricultural drones. It's something that's sort of newer to the North American industry. Ag drones have been around in Asia, parts of Europe, and South America for quite some time. So typically North America, we were a little bit behind the time, but they're just a fabulous addition to the toolkit in the farming industry. So we added that as part of our business. Primarily, we were dealing in the commercial side of the drones, so the bigger drones, and then added the ag drones to our repertoire.
So we've covered many of the industry applications. So we talked about thermal drones, we talked about mapping and things like that. And when we thought about doing agriculture drones, we thought that it would be good to have someone who is an expert in the field in agriculture drones. Some of the main applications where one could use a drone in agriculture, not necessarily an ag drone. So there's just to make the distinction, there are ag drones, which are drones specifically designed for agriculture, but you can use other drones in agriculture. So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. Spraying. So this is the main one that we're going to talk about today is spraying. So we'll kind of circle back on that. One of the things that we talked about a couple weeks ago when we did multispectral was crop health monitoring. Now that is an agricultural application where you could use a drone. So if you're interested in crop health monitoring, you can check out our video on that. One of the other ones that I thought of, this was just me brainstorming, is inspections of greenhouse roofs, which would be either with a thermal camera or a telephoto. So we've talked about thermal cameras, we've talked about using it for inspection, we've talked about mapping. All of these applications have their niche in agriculture, or you could use all of these drones in an agricultural setting. In general, what are the rules for agricultural applications? Well, same as everything else. If the drone is over 250 grams, you either need a basic or advanced certificate depending on where you're flying. Controlled airspace, near people, you need an advanced. If you're in Class G, away from everybody, you just need a basic. Now, the rules for spraying is maybe a little bit different and will most likely require an SFOC. Now, you'll see this is as of May 2024. We're expecting some clarification on the rules. What did we say by September? We're expecting some clarification?
Yeah, I think that's when Transport Canada's coming out with their Gazette, which will sort of lay out what the proposed changes after the consultation process that we went through to finally put some of the new regulatory things into place that's supposed to be April of 2025.
Yeah, so in about April 2025, the rules for agricultural spraying most likely will be a little bit different. In general, the rules for spraying, you'll most likely need an advanced pilot certificate. Mostly this is because if you need to do an SFOC application and you show up with just a basic, they're going to tell you to go back and get your advanced. It is not a listed requirement in the regulations, but no shot they let you get one without an advanced. No. And then a special flight operation certificate. So why would someone need a special flight operation certificate? There are two potential things. If the drone is over 25 kilograms, you need an SFOC. Full stop. That's it. End of story. So most agriculture drones, once you put the payload in them, they are over 25 kilos.
Yeah, there's only one drone, the T10, which actually comes in at 24.8 loaded. So that's the one that you won't need quite the SFOC on the weight classification for that one.
But also, if you are dropping a material that is biohazardous or a material that could cause harm to persons, you require an SFOC.
That's where you would, yes.
So spray, that I would consider that potentially biohazardous, potentially could cause harm to people. And then the future is going to be the level 1 complex, which will allow operations up to 150 kilograms in a low-risk environment, most likely. So that will most likely be Class G airspace and away from people. Now, what do you need for an SFOC? Well, the rules for what you actually need to provide in the SFOC application change pretty much every version of the AIM. Refer to the AIM for the up-to-date procedures on how to actually submit the application and what materials you'll need to submit to transport. Very broadly, what you'll definitely need is an advanced pilot certificate and then detailed SOPs, safety plans, and risk management. Especially if it's a heavy lift drone, the safety and the risk management, that's the big thing. You've done a number of or at least one SFOC application. So what is in the process for the SFOC application?
What we did for the SFOC that we required, so it gives us a year's blanket coverage. You still have to, if you're in controlled airspace, you would still have to go through the regular process through NAV Canada and everything else on top of that. But we took a farm that was in probably the most highest risk area. It was actually close to the airport, and so we used that as our background as an example of this is the procedure and the SOP that we would do if we were using that scenario. And as long as we ticked all of the boxes using that scenario, then anything going forward that would be equal or lesser to that would generally show that we knew what we were doing in that instance.
So when you submit the SFOC application, they send you back what's called the compliance matrix. I've seen the compliance matrix for foreign operators because it's very straightforward. It's literally you just load in your SOPs and you're good to go. What sort of for this type of operation, what sort of documents were required from the compliance matrix?
So you're going to be looking at so all pilot certifications, anybody who's going to be flying the drones have to be listed in. You need to have the schematics and everything in the operating manual for the drone that you're going, or drones that you are going to be flying. You need to have all your procedures, so your emergency, all of that has to be listed in there as well. And if you're depending on what you're going to be using, and that's where we get into that other side, which is the pesticide. So let's say we're not using something that's considered a chemical or toxic, you would have to list that. List what it is you're going to be using, its ingredient list, so that there's a record of that as well.
One of the things that is a little bit confusing for people who are just getting into ag drones is that dropping a pesticide is actually not Transport Canada that regulates what pesticides you can drop and who can drop pesticides. So what's kind of the process for being able to drop a pesticide, not even just from a drone, from any sort of aircraft? Like, what's that process look like?
So pesticides are regulated under the PMRA, which is the Pesticide Management Regulatory Agency, which is sort of an offshoot, I believe, of Health Canada. And so they're the ones that regulate all pesticides, no matter who's spraying it and what faction that's being sprayed, that's who takes control of it. So currently there are only 3, they're actually a vector-based mosquito control product. I think it's Verbeck or something like that.
It's like a pellet.
Yeah, that can be used with a drone. It's labeled for, so I'll get to labeling in a second. That can be used with a drone for mosquito mitigation. On the labeling side, there are a number of pesticides that are labeled for aerial application. However, that does not mean drones. Aha, that's right. So there's where the thing is, it specifically would have to say, as this goes forward, RPAS would have to be on the label.
So when they're saying aerial application, currently they mean
crop dusting,
or a helicopter,
correct.
right? Yep. So they are making the distinction between an RPAS and a traditional crop aircraft.
Correct. My understanding is that they've done some testing on a number of different types of pesticides, and hopefully within a short period of time, at least this year, they'll start releasing some of probably the more commonly used ones that will be labeled with RPAS use.
Okay, and then can anybody just drop pesticide or?
No. Then you have to go and get your pesticide certification. So basically it's your spray ticket.
Okay.
So you need to have an understanding of chemicals, chemical application. I mean, there's a lot of potential here. So hypothetically, if you decide to get into the spray service industry and you're going out and want to spray Farmer A's land, but Farmer B, who's right next door to him, is certified organic, and you're using a pesticide when you're spraying on Farmer A, and some of that drifts into Farmer B, well, now you've basically null and voided his organic certification of his farm. So there's a lot of things that go into it. Drift has always been the big thing with the testing, is the type of drift that drones are giving off.
Right, and then to actually get your spray ticket, is that an exam you take, or is it a...
It's a course you have to take, and then you have to write an exam, yeah.
I guess you have to go into some government building and do that.
I know you can do the course online. I'm not quite so sure. And there's a Canada-wide general guideline for your spraying, but each province has its own things as well. So depending on which province you're wanting to spray in, you're going to have to look into what the provincial ticket is for that as well.
Marcus Weber is saying there's only one application for a drone pesticide before PMRA, and it's not a commonly used agricultural pesticide. It is an industrial herbicide.
Yeah.
That sounds like what I've heard just talking to people who know about such things. But you were saying that there's hopefully in the future we're looking at that being expanded.
Yeah, the rumor mill has it that it's being expanded. The PMRA knows that farmers are eager to use this technology in spraying, and certainly they've wanted to do their due diligence and their testing before allowing certain pesticides to come out. So
if someone was new to spraying and if they were looking at purchasing some hardware, getting an SFOC and getting a spray ticket, how long do you think that process would it be?
It's going to really depend on how much focus they're putting into that. The pesticide, off the top of my head, I can't remember how long it takes for that ticketing, but it's, you're going to take some time to do that. I mean, there's a lot to know. And it helps if you have an understanding of agriculture and farming in general, because generally you're going to be working with an agronomist. Or the farmer is working with an agronomist if the farmer's wanting to do this themselves, and a lot of farmers do. The agronomist is the one that's writing the prescription for whatever is to be sprayed. So, they're going to base and calculate off of that. But yeah, you're going to need to do that. You're going to need your SFOC can take up to 30 days with Transport Canada.
Or more for a high complex SFOC.
That's exactly right.
There's going to be some back and forth about if you were doing anything heavy lift, there's high probability that there's going to be some back and forth.
Yeah, and that's where we're taking your time and getting all your ducks in a row to get your SFOC laid out correctly before you submit it, and that's just going to cut down that time where Transport Canada may come back to you and say, no, you need to fix this section up.
One of the things that happens when you submit the SFOC is Transport will say how risky this operation is, and we call that a sale. Normally for agriculture, what sale category would this normally be in?
I think ours, we just got it. Was it a 2? I think we were under a 2 because we weren't, again, because there's no chemical complexity in that. So that would elevate the sale level.
Yeah. So it goes from 1 to 5, the sale. There's a sale 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The higher the number, the more complex the operation is, the more documentation that Transport is going to want to see for that. So a sale 2, that's not a very, or in the scheme of the sale system, the higher the complexity, the more documentation Transport can, or not necessarily documentation, but the more things they're going to ask you about. So if you have an understanding like, this operation, this is most likely going to be a sale 4 operation, that means I'm going to need to do this, 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 and this. These SFOC applications can get quite complicated, and I have heard through the grapevine that maybe not most, but many people who have got these agricultural SFOCs have done it with the use of a consultant. It's not generally not something that if there was a farmer who just went out and purchased a spray drone, it wouldn't be something that they could potentially accomplish without the background knowledge.
No, and actually we used a consultant for that. Now that I have a good understanding of doing it, with a simple complexity, that was an acronym, was something contradictory. It wasn't a simple complexity. Something that wasn't really complex. Certainly we could probably do it, but yes, you definitely need to be working with somebody who's been doing a lot of these and has a really good understanding. And again, it's going to depend on what it is you're going to be using.
So Bill, who has done many of these, he says that it's sale 4 if you're close to a control zone and sale 2 if it's not close to a control zone. That tracks. That makes sense. So yeah, because if you're close to a control zone, if you were to potentially have a flyaway, now you've got 70 kilogram thing going through an airport.
But you also have to consider that 70 kilogram drone probably is only going to be in the air for 9 minutes. Yeah, and it's and getting into a height elevation with weight, this, and again, these are kind of the interesting things that you factor into when you're having to figure out the complexity and the what ifs, and that's part of it is what if compared to something like a Mavic which could go on for half an hour if it flew away. You're not going to have that much with a very heavy drone.
Yeah. We did the Abbotsford Air Show last year, and we actually had the T10 and the T40 set up, and we were spritzing them, which the drone was not very happy with. And people kept asking me, oh, well, how long is the battery life on this? And it's like, it's like 10 minutes. But speaking of some of the hardware, we can talk a little bit about some of the hardware that's available. And you mentioned it before, but one of the ones that is popular is the T10. Now, the T10 is popular because it is below 25 kilograms. So the SFOC for over 25 kilograms is not required. This cuts down the complexity of the operation by a fairly significant margin. Downsides, of course, got a much lower capacity. It's like
8 liters.
8 liters.
Yeah.
So on the DJI site, it says that it can do 15 acres per hour, but I don't know.
Well, when you're looking at spray rates in acres per hour, that's on max.
Okay.
So I was in Alberta recently, and we were on 90 acres, and we were going full bore with full open spray rate. And I mean, and in some instances where you have flatland crops, nothing around you, you know, you can just let it go. It doesn't need to do a slow fly. And it was on a farmer's field. We were just doing water because we were just testing. And he can do that entire farm field in under 3 hours.
With the T10, you said?
No, that was with the T40.
Until we got the T50, like, very recently.
It's just out, yes.
Just out. This was the top of the line. Higher capacity. It's the tank is quite large, but it is over 25 kilograms. I think its maximum takeoff weight is much higher than.
Yeah, it is. It's in the 90, I think it is, range, and it's got a 40-liter tank. Actually, the T50 is the same. It has a 40-liter tank as well, but it had other things that were added to it. So it has an additional radar. It actually is structured very much like the fly cart actually was structured very much off of the T50 in its framing and in the radar array.
Isn't so the fly cart is DJI's new package delivery drone, and just looking at it, it looks like they took the T50, they removed the tank, and just put a box.
It's basically what they did.
It's meant to pick up heavy things. If someone were to like just be starting with egg spraying, would you recommend them to just jump to the higher, even if it's over the 25 kilos? Or
well, it's going to depend on what they're spraying. So you look at farms in the Lower Mainland and the Fraser Valley, they're not as big as going out to Alberta where you see farm land for days. So, you know, you're going to want to do your research in what it is eventually that you're going to spray and roughly what your acreage is going to be. Depending on what it is that you're going to be spraying, you're not always spraying at a really high rate. You may be spot spraying, so you're not actually spraying an entire field, or you're going to get to a point where maybe you're doing an entire field where you're spraying and then you need to go back and spot spray areas where sometimes maybe a smaller drone might be good for that. It's going to depend.
Part of the thing about the T10 versus the T40 is it's smaller. So if you did need to spot spray something, it would fit in your pickup truck a little bit easier.
It does.
The 40 is huge.
And that's the other thing too, is what are the other things that you need in order, especially if you're wanting, let's say, to start a service business and you're not a farmer, you're wanting to start the service. There's not a lot of service businesses in Canada. It's more so in the States they've gotten into it. And because definitely the regulations is what holds that back. But if you're thinking of doing that, you know, you need to look at, okay, so does the farmer have power supply so that you can charge your batteries? No, well, then you're going to need a generator. You're going to need a truck to haul all of this. Is the farmer providing the containers and the agitating equipment to mix up the chemicals? Yes, no, so this is where a lot of this comes into play. I've seen some pretty fancy and pretty technical setups from people, and this is down in the States, who provide a spray service for farmers, and they're quite fantastic. Even if I Google them and find people's setups online, their trailers and everything.
Yeah, because it would be a trailer full. So when we went to the air show, like, did you rent that trailer or was that your trailer?
No, that was a rental.
Mm-hmm. Anyways, we needed to rent a trailer to get the T40 and the T10 to the air show. And we packed that thing. We packed that trailer full of everything. Any other thoughts on the hardware? I think what we've kind of mentioned is that if you are a farmer, it's the hardware that you purchase, like, not not even in just the drone, but everything you purchase is going to look different than if you wanted to be a service provider for spraying. Because if you're a service provider for spraying, you might need additional equipment
on top of that. And you have to remember parts. So the drones do need servicing. You need to take care of them. So at the end of a spraying season, you need to make sure that, your batteries are stored properly. You check over your equipment. You clean the drone really well. It should be cleaned after every application or day use anyways. Rinsing it off. They are waterproof, so you can give them a wash down and make sure that they're cleaned up, because that will last you a lot longer, where some of the parts will start to get some wear and tear, and maybe some with the potentially chemical use in them.
Do these ones have the maintenance schedule where you have to send it to DJI?
No. So we, as a requirement of being an agricultural dealer, we also have to provide service. So we do have parts and service to service these.
Because I know that some of the matrices have a maintenance schedule where you have to service them every so often.
Yeah, there is a general guideline for maintenance, definitely. It's not really a drone you can pack up and send back down to DJI, so we have to be able to do that.
We did a whole podcast on maintenance, but just remember, if the manufacturer lays out that you have to service something every certain amount of time, that is your legal obligation. The drone is not considered airworthy if you don't follow that maintenance schedule. So if the manual says once a year you have to take it to the service center and they take a look at it, then you have to do that once a year, and you're not fulfilling your obligations if you're not doing that.
Yeah, and your pre-flight checks and you're just looking over your drone. It's no different than if you were looking over, a Mini. It's the same type of thing. You need to have a good check over of your drone.
Propellers, landing gear, cracks in the arms, all sorts, like same things as any pre-flight, except it's just much bigger. And if something looks bad, then you don't go flying. Probably you'd want to have an extra set of propellers in your truck. So these things, they're not designed to go much above maybe 10 to 15 feet.
No, so you're not getting a lot of height. So as we talked earlier, so for example, corn. And let's say you need to do a spray run on your corn and it's at 6 feet. Then you may be another 5 feet on top of that. And again, it's going to depend on what the crop is, because some crops are delicate and the downwash on these are pretty heavy duty.
The wear on the aircraft, like if you're close to crops, you could potentially suck in a pebble or even like if it was wheat, like you could suck in a grain of wheat into the props.
Oh no, you'll probably be high enough for that.
Okay.
No, you're going to be pushing that down. No.
Okay, well. Yep.
Well, it certainly is a continuing learning curve as this industry starts to grow and expand. I'm always learning something every day about it. So.
Well, thanks very much for joining us on the live stream
today.
Me. And thanks everybody who is watching. If you're watching us later on YouTube, this was recorded about a month ago. If you want to watch these live, you can join our community, community.coastaldrone.co. If you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Really helps the channel. And we shall see you on the next episode of Coastal Drone Weekly Live. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.